Hi fabulous artists! Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be looking at 5 different types of oil bars. I use oil bars a lot in my work with oil and cold wax, and you can see some of the marks that they make in my paintings over here and on this one down in that area. They're really fun to work with and I use them a lot. So today I'm going to compare five different brands because they all behave a little bit differently. And we're going to be looking at them on dry panel and also working wet onto wet. So let's get started and look at some close-ups of how these 5 brands work and how they work differently. Okay everybody, today we are going to be looking at these 5 different types of oil bars. We're going to start with the Sennelier oil sticks, and they are soft creamy consistency and a great size. And make sure when you purchase them you get the oil sticks and not the oil pastels. They are 2 very different creatures, and we do not use oil pastels in cold wax work as they do not dry, and you need a fixative and things like that, and we don't use that we don't mix that with oil and cold wax. So just make sure you get the oil sticks. The next product we're going to be looking at is the R and F oil bars, and you see 2 different sizes here, but that's just because one of them's been used a bunch, or those 2 have been used a bunch. They do, however, come in different sizes. They come much larger than the ones pictured here as well. Shiva oil bars are some other ones that I like and do use. They have a very different consistency than those first 2 I showed you, but they have a really nice color range and some colors that some of the other oil bars do not have. deMarrais is a relatively new brand on the scene, and he's making some great colors in 2 different sizes. As you can kind of see here, again, 2 on the left are used, but the 2 on the right are pretty fresh and new, and you can get a sense of their size. Great and very nice color assortment and great consistency. And Winsor Newton oil bars are the last ones we'll be looking at. Mine are a little bit old, and I think it might have affected their consistency a little bit. They're kind of a little stickier, as you'll see. So they're still very good oil bars, possibly not my favorites. We'll have to wait till the end of the video for you to find that out. But let's actually look at them on a panel now. Okay, this is a pre-gessoed panel, just store-bought, and now we're going to start here with this oil stick by Sennelier. And as you're going to see, all of these oil bars, when you don't use them, form a skin. You can see it on the top there. It's been slightly peeled back already. Sorry, I'm a little off camera there. There we go. And you can see how you have to peel the film back, just like when your oil paint dries overnight, maybe in a pile, and you have to kind of peel back a film to get to the fresh paint. That is the case on oil bars, as you will see in all this. So you can see that goes on very easily with a very light touch. I'm going to use a couple different colors here so you get a sense of that. And again, I'm going to be peeling the film off of all of these, or the skin I should say, off of all these, so you can kind of see how, and I think it also helps show you how soft some of them are and how a little bit harder some of them are. So anyway, yeah, you can see I have a very light touch there. Oil paint comes right off very easily, gives a nice sort of crayon mark. Here's the R and F. They call them pigment sticks in this case. This is a really great color. So I kind of picked some sort of similar colors in the brands, kind of what I had. I don't have every color in every brand, and just again kind of I peel off the tops and sometimes some of the edges, and you can see again very light touch here, and just putting it on, very soft light touch, and the bar comes down, applies on the board very easily. So you can see there the skin, I'm showing you, when it's skinned over, you don't get any paint off of it, so you have to take that off, and then it comes off very softly and very easily. So I would say that the consistency of the Sennelier and the R&F are very similar. They're both kind of creamy and soft to the touch, and just a light touch will have them come off easily on your substrate, whatever it is. And we're going to use a couple different colors here, just so you get a sense. They can be very vibrant, which is really wonderful. I mean, there are people who just paint with the oil bars, right? With that, not necessarily with cold wax or with oil paint. They just paint solely with oil bars, which is very, very cool. So this is Shiva. Now Shiva has a very different consistency than those first two. Shiva is much, much harder, and you can see that from how I'm peeling off the skin. It's just I'm trying to find the camera there. It's just harder to peel off, and it's almost like it's flaky. It kind of flakes off, and the bar itself is much more, not exactly as hard as a hard crayon, but closer to that, whereas the other ones are much creamier and much, much softer. So what that means is you have to, when you draw, you have to press a little harder. Now it's coming off fairly easily here, but in general, you have to press. It's a harder touch when you apply it. This is also Shiva. It's one that's just been well used. I happen to really like this color. It's the only brand that I've found this particular color in. So even though it's a harder oil stick, I like the color, so I buy it and I use it in different. What happens is the softer sticks you can use very easily wet into wet, as I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. And the harder ones, it's harder to do that because they kind of scrape away. So now this is Paul deMarrais, and he's relatively new on the scene in terms of making this product. And as you can see, there's a couple different sizes. This is his large bar, which is awesome. By the way, I think I mentioned this, the R&F makes larger bars too. They get a lot larger, which is fun. And this is his regular size stick. And so those are the two different sizes of his. The consistency of his are very much like R&F and Sennelier. There you can see the two different sizes side by side. One thing that's nice about his product is that that you can get two different sizes, but also they're reasonably priced, especially if you're buying the smaller ones in particular, because they're smaller. But that way you can get a sense of the color, and if you really like it, and then you can go back and order larger ones to fit, if you decide that's the color you want. So it kind of gives you the opportunity to sample some different colors without spending a fortune. And in general, both his large and small oil sticks are very well priced. So again, you can see this is very soft and creamy and comes off very easily, much like R&F and Sennelier. And just to show you a few more colors. Yeah, it's always a trick to peel these because you want to take off the least amount of paint as possible. It kind of becomes a little art in learning how to do that. But again, there's some really nice colors, and you can see this. So this is cadmium red light here, and it is cadmium red light up on top from R&F. And you can see the colors are just a little bit different. They're not exactly the same. So that's another thing to think about when you're choosing brands, or you may like, maybe you like, because I particularly like both of these. They're a little bit different cadmium red lights, but I like both of them, so I have both of them in my kit. And now we have the Winsor Newton oil bars, and these are, you can see how it's like it's kind of firmer and a little stickier to peel. It was a little bit harder to peel back, but then they're kind of soft in the middle, but they also, the consistency is a little, I don't know, I would call it stickier. Now, admittedly, these are older, so it's possible that I didn't have the freshest Winsor Newton oil bars, so that is a possibility. But I do know that they have a little different feeling. They're firmer than the Senneliers and the R&Fs and Paul deMarrais. And I'm pressing a little harder to get that to come off, like you're seeing that. And the yellow. Again, I tried to use some of the colors that I had that were somewhat similar to each other. You can see I'm just kind of pressing harder to get the color to come off. And you know, that's typical of these bars, you know, in that they of these brands, and that they're a little bit different. They're not all exactly the same, and they have different qualities in terms of their feel. So now I'm just showing you in terms of like spreading or moving how easy or difficult it is to do, and I'm going to use my fingers here in a minute to kind of move the paint around, and you can see how it spreads. It's just picking off a little skin there. So it can be easily blended. Very soft and smooth here with the Paul deMarrais, and easily blended if you want to do that. Of course, these can be easily combined with oil paint or oil and cold wax. I use my fingers a lot when I actually paint, so I always have my gloves on, and I'm often use fingers when I'm using oil and cold wax, so my gloves are used to it. And then you can see kind of how that pulls a little bit. You can get that idea of it's just a little stickier than the other bars. Get some really nice blending with the softer ones, and you just get really fun effects with oil bars, and I highly recommend that you try them if you are interested. Now, so this is wet, right? These are relatively, I just put them on, and now you can see what happens if I apply the bar on top. We're going to do this on another panel as well. So this is working wet into wet, and you can see that I can still make the mark fairly easily wet into wet with the oil bar, with these softer ones. Now Shiva's harder, it's more difficult. So what you're seeing there is more of the Shiva, you're scraping into the paint some. So as opposed to the oil bar just being applied right on top, like you can see in some of the other marks, you're actually also taking the original layer of paint off because you're scraping through it. So that's what happens when you use the firmer oil bars. So they work differently, and when you use them in your painting process makes a difference. And I really did kind of struggle with these Winsor Newton ones. Okay, so now what we're looking at is oil and cold wax. This left side has been brayered on, and the right side has been squeegeed on, so it's a little bit thicker. And so you can see, I'm going to show you what happens wet into wet. So these are both just done recently. I can pick a different color there so you can see. So you can see this is applying the oil bar right on top of wet cold wax. A squeegee side that's fairly thicker, and then a thinner layer of the brayered side on the right. So I'm showing you the important thing here, the takeaway is these different brands that you can work wet into wet with, which is really great if you're wanting to continue and not wait for your paint to dry. You can see you can get great marks with them, wet into wet. Now that one's digging a little bit into the thicker squeegee side, but works better. I mean, they still are, the paint's lying on top. It's not too much digging in. Now this is going to dig in a little bit more because remember the Shivas were firmer and harder, so you can see you don't get quite the same mark. So the Shivas work better when your layer underneath is more dry, or you know, it's dry as possible, honestly. Otherwise, you're just scraping through the paint mostly, as opposed to putting the color of the oil bar on top of the paint. And same thing with this one. You're really mostly just scraping through to the layer beneath. And the Paul deMarrais, I think I'd take off, I needed to get some edges here off so it didn't scrape through. The Paul deMarrais will lay on top of the wet cold wax work here, just like the first two did, the Sennelier and the RNF. So it works quite nicely. Again, when you're working wet on top of a squeegeed area that's thicker, you know, it's pretty hard to get paint to sit on top of that because you're working into some kind of thicker paint. But you can, to some degree, do that with these softer colors, or brands, I should say. There, I mean, that's nice because you can kind of see how the light touch I had. Didn't have to press very hard because the oil sticks are so creamy. Now this one, because it was a little more tacky, I did have to press harder. So I could get the color to come off, but I was also scraping through the paint more. And we'll look at close-ups here in just a second, and then you can see a little bit clearer how that looks. Okay, here we go. So here you can see where it's really kind of on top, and also where the oil bars ended up scraping through the paint. And they're down at the bottom. So the blue Winsor Newton really hardly came off at all. It's mostly just scraping through. The yellow was a little bit easier. Again, on that right side is going to be the toughest judge because that was squeegeed on in the thickest area right there where I'm squeegeeing now. And so I'm just doing this to show you how you it's kind of like encaustic work where you fuse the two layers together. When you squeegee over something with a very light touch, it's almost like fusing the two layers. You get the oil bar to kind of sink into and become one a little bit with the layer underneath. And I'll show you a close-up here of that in a minute so you can kind of see that a little bit more. Here we go. See how it presses the paint into the layer below so they feel a little bit more like they're one. I mean, it's still on top, but it's a little bit more together than it is without the squeegeeing step. Okay, so let's look quickly at a little review of what we found out, and you can see what my favorites are. All right, the first one I would say is RNF oil bars. I love them. They come in a great amount of colors, soft, dependable. I always enjoy using them. And let's see what else I've got. Next is the Sennelier oil sticks. These are actually relatively new to me. I hadn't been using them until recently, but I really like the size. They were a great size, a decent price, and equally soft to the RNF. Also love the Paul deMarrais. I love the two different sizes he does, that I can order some a little bit smaller and some larger. I find that that's a huge bonus for me. And great consistency and great creaminess to them. So highly recommend them. And the Shiva oil bars, again, they're firmer. They're sort of for a different part of the painting process, but they have some really great colors that are hard to find in other places, and they're definitely worthwhile. And lastly, the Winsor Newton, which I didn't care for as much as the other ones. I think they're okay, but they're not my favorite. So definitely big star for RNF, star for Paul deMarrais, star for Sennelier, like a 3/4 star for Shiva because they're not as soft, and then Winsor Newton, not my favorite. So I hope this helps you and gives you a little bit of information about oil bars, and I hope you can go and play with them and have a great time.